I want to welcome you all to this panel today on the fight for Namibian miners and the struggle in Namibia and international solidarity. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a video that is about some of the struggles going on, which is kind of an overview of some of the struggles that are going on in Namibia.
The MUN says the fact that employees' annual age increase is yet to be implemented. CNNC Racing Uranium has been trying to renegotiate some of the retrenchment packages and recruitment policy and the performance and conduct procedure, according to the MUN's Racing branch. The MUN said this at a media conference in which the union briefed journalists on what it termed stalled wage negotiations that has been dragging on for 4 months.
Fellow Namibians, Chinese investments like CNNC is not here to better the lives of Namibians. That is a myth that deserves correction. They are here to exploit Namibian people and its natural resources for the benefit of their nations and government. Chinese leadership and people at all levels owe that duty and patriotism to the Chinese people, not to the Namibians.
The MUN further alleges that the company not only derailed negotiations, but also intimidated and threatened workers with job losses and possible closure of the mine. The union is calling for government intervention. Members have already voted yes to a strike, the union says, though it hopes to reach an acceptable agreement with management before industrial action be deemed necessary.
The China National Nuclear Corporation, which took over Rosing uranium mine, dismissed the 9 employees, all of them members of the MUN's Rosing branch executive committee. They were charged with gross negligence, bringing the company into disrepute and breach of confidentiality. One of the discharged employees, John Hamtenya, who was the MUN Rosing branch chairperson, described the allegations as unfounded and amount to a witch hunt.
The Chinese National Nuclear Corporation management used every opportunity to suppress and threaten union rights by demanding to renegotiate, among others, the following document to less favorable agreements. They demanded to renegotiate the recognition of procedural agreement of 14 November 1988, the performance and conduct procedure or the disciplinary code, the recruitment policy, the retrenchment package agreement, the condition of employment, and under specific items that they wanted to change in this condition of employment are mainly the leave days, the sick leave days, the commutation system, and etc.
After the arbitration hearing, the demonstrators were informed that the hearing was postponed to April this year.
They told us soppy story that their representative became ill yesterday, and they even had a medical record, and they wanted a postponement. So eventually, after a lot of fight, we secured that we get 3 days, and it was stated on the paper that it is a final postponement, which means that there will be no further postponements. The case will have to be finished on that day. We will not accept any further postponement.
An employee who preferred to remain anonymous while speaking to MICT Erongo described the working condition at the mine as hostile, and employees were afraid of speaking out as they no longer had union representation.
Next. To the branch executive, to the Cheetah Cement. We, the employee of Cheetah Cement, hereby present the petition to the Werok Cement, Cheetah Cement Management. Attention, addressing respective bodies dealing with safety, health, security, and justice. Chinese national previously charged for assault and battering another employee at work owns a firearm that he uses to threaten employees when inquiring on work-related issues without facing any penalties from the company. For the safety and well-being and employee welfare, we demand that the Werok Cheetah Cement applies the code of conduct and immediately dismiss the employees. To do so, the affected members will be forced to invoke in Section 42 of the Labour Act. For the safety and employees working with inappropriate PPE in respective department, company has been operating for almost 3 years. Yes. And yet a lab technician working with corrosive and flammable chemicals wears the same PPE as the office employee. We petition that the company undergoes a strict evaluation and immediate implementation of the industrial grade PPE for the respective department that applies the Namibian standard regulation on safety in the mining industry. Attention, employee-employer relationship. We demand the immediate dismissal of the HR manager, Zain Court, due to his incompetence as a human resource manager at Werok Cement, Cheetah Cement. Proof of incompetence and unfair labor practices are deliberately delayed tactics when dealing with issues affecting the working condition of the employees. Yes. Constant threat to dismiss Namibian employees, victimization of employees, employee representative when they try to exercise our democratic rights. Upon employment, the HR manager then quote reduced employees' hourly rate without consulting the bargaining agent. HR manager has increased this.
The Mine Workers Union, however, claimed that since the strike started, the company offered a $300 increase on housing allowance and accommodation. The union also confirmed that the mining and processing of marble is still ongoing, despite employees being on an active strike.
Since the commencement of the strike on Monday, the 12th of April 2021, we have seen nothing but non-compliance by the management. Management continues to employ Chinese nationals who are operating front-end loaders to load the material. Those are the jobs that are supposed to be done by the people here at the picketing line. Viva la Viva! Viva la Viva! That is an intentional, a rude and systematic way of telling us to our faces that we matter nothing. We are standing here in the sun since Monday. We matter nothing. Production is going on.
A meeting between the union and management was held on Friday, and the company's general manager, Mike Chai, was requested to address the workers, but failed to do so, and instead attempted to sneak out of the premises through the back gate. This angered the workers, who decided to block all entrances to the mine. The Karibe police station commander was called in to defuse the flaring tempers, which in the end forced the general manager to address the workers.
From our position, we can readdress the demand again in the honest manner, and then we can continue.
Chai pleaded for more time to come up with a satisfactory feedback.
Down exploitation, down! Down! Down exploitation, down! Down! Down Francis Simbolino, down! Down! Down Abraham Sumeta, down! Down! Down Cuban, down! Down! Down Patrick, down! Down! Down Siboy Pangala, down! Down! Down Lily, down! Down! Down China, down! Down! Down Candace, down! Down! Down Ona, down! Down! Down Andreas, down! 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 Salary slavery down! Down! Away! Economic transformation in our lifetime now! Now!
Mevi le tua fulika omuno maepeko avaningirwa owina opo tukolonyekwe Evile tuafulika omuno maepeko taganingirwa owina opo tukolonyekwe tala utale nawa evela lunduluka lina mpepo taipepe mpepo yelundulani.
Our first speaker at this panel is Johannes Humatenya, and he's the chair of the Miners Union in Namibia Rossing branch. Welcome, Johannes.
Mic is muted, Comrade John.
Okay, you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I did that. Thank you, Steve. And to all the comrades, thank you for this platform. And viva to the struggle of the workers all over the world. Can I be, am I?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
John.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, beautiful. Beautiful. As Comrade Steve has rightly indicated, I'm the chairman, or was the chairman, among those that were abruptly dismissed by the mine. Just excuse me, I quickly want to turn off TV.
Okay, and maybe you can put a light on so you can have more light on the picture.
Good.
John, you are the chairman.
You are the chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Comrade. Yes, rightly said, the chairman of the Rossing branch. Yeah, I'm not sure about my task. Can I quickly be briefed as to what's my task?
Just briefly out.
Am I just to talk about what transpired and what happened?
Yeah, you briefly update the struggle, where you're at, and what kind of support you need internationally.
Okay, beautiful. I'll basically do the. I'll then basically do the update on the court cases, and then Comrade George and Comrade Hewat Beukes, or preferably Comrade Hewat Beukes will do the update on the court cases. I'll do the update on the struggle. Then Comrade George will come in on the international appeal. The struggle is real. The struggle continues. We continue to suffer in terms of what they've done. We are still outside, and the feeling currently of the members, like especially that on the site, is that they have no longer protection. They cannot even speak out about the mistreatment that is currently happening on the mine. They are afraid to speak. Of recent, one lady again almost had a miscarriage. I was just given an update. Almost had a miscarriage, but she cannot bring those allegations. She cannot bring those complaints to the employer for the reason of being victimized. So everyone on the mine is feeling that they no longer have protection. They are just there as robots, working as they are told, because any mistake that you make, you are going to be dismissed. Yeah, this is basically what's happening. They managed to diffuse the union spirit on the mine. They've instilled strong fear in the employees to such an extent that they can no longer stand up for their rights. Their rights presently, it means nothing at all. For us outside, we continue to wage the fight. We are continuing to mobilize. We have formed a WhatsApp group whereby we are then onboarding other minds, other people that are having that are sharing the same struggle with us, that are being dismissed or being busted by the Chinese employer. Not only the Chinese employer, mind you, the Chinese employers are mostly sometimes they do it directly, but sometimes they are using our own people, our own very people. As much as it's Chinese employers that are behind the screens, but the people that are executing the final job, the people that are doing the things in the field, it's our people. So wherever the force is coming from, whether it's directly from the Chinese employer themselves or the mistreatment is coming from our fellow Namibians, the end result is that it disadvantages a Namibian, it disadvantages an employee. So that's what we are basically trying to fight. So with this WhatsApp group that we have created and with the reach out that we are doing, we are trying to sensitize everyone to say that, look, you are not alone. We are in a struggle, and the struggle must be won. And for us to win, we need to unite as employees that are subjected to the same type of conditions and mistreatments. That's basically what's currently prevalent. That's basically what's currently prevalent. Of course, to us that have lost the jobs, we are financially staffed, and the postponement, as Comrade Beukes has rightly said, they try to drag the case as long as they can, and the reason for that is so that you can then be financially crippled. At the end of the day, if they propose any settlement of any nature, you jump for it, knowing that you have a financial burden. A colleague of mine, and most of us, we are not able to pay for our assets anymore that we acquired through the bank, and we are looking at options as to what to do now in terms of the assets, the car, the houses. Should we let it go, or should we wait until they repossess them? This is currently what we are facing, because it was never planned. If it's something that we foresaw, or something that we planned, at least we could have made some kind of arrangement. But we are faced with this type of challenges, and we don't know how to basically then escape or get out of them. We were hoping that the cases could be resolved as early as possible so that we could return to work, and that seems like that's a dream. It won't be happening anytime now. It might happen. I mean, if it's possible at the next sitting, we might be able to finish the arbitration part. But as we know, again, we'll have an issue with the arbitrators, of which they might take longer to deliver the ruling. And then apart from that, again, we'll have issues whether the company wants to appeal or not. And from what we've seen previously, regardless of whether it's obvious that you have won the case, like in our case now, in terms of procedure, we don't even need to talk about substantive issue. In terms of procedure, it's illegal, it's unlawful what they've done. But still, the company will want to appeal. So which means we might be out of work. We might be out unless something drastically happens, unless there is interference of the workers, unless workers internationally and locally really stands up and demand our return. If that's not going to happen, we might be out of work for the next 2 to 3 years. And by the time this issue is resolved, our livelihood would have been completely then negatively affected. So this is what's currently at play, and I just hope there is questions, and I hope that's the update that was needed. If there any question, I'm able to then answer.
Okay, why don't we go through the full panel of people and then comrades, and then we can have discussion and questions. So our next speaker is Comrade George Martin. He's the secretary of the Rossing branch. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Comrade Steve. Comradely greetings to everyone. My name is George Martin, the secretary of the Rossing branch. I would like to read out the international appeal that we wrote to the international communities out there, and to all the international supporters and solidarity people, international and locally. Firstly is seeing the videos that Comrade Steve played earlier, it brought out an emotional side, because looking at what is happening in Namibia, it's very scary, because these guys, or the capitalists, are busy destroying the unions all around the country. And if they are not brought to book or challenged, we'll have, at the end of the day, no unions, and workers will not have any rights. We've seen that their aims are to bring back the labor contract systems, and to keep workers working like robots without any says. So we need to condemn all those actions and stand around workers in solidarity. Comrade Steve, if you allow me, I'll just read. It's about 2 or 3 pages. I'll just read the appeal. The Namibian Union movement and associated rights was a fact of life until Chinese imperialists decided otherwise, with the tacit approval of Western imperialists. On the 29th of September 2020, the Chinese controlled management of China National Nuclear Corporation, Rossing Uranium Limited, unlawfully dismissed the Mine Workers Union of Namibia, CNNC Rossing Limited branch executives in our personal capacity, employment capacity, and effectively ejected the union from the mine. This was an unlawful renunciation of the collective agreement that was in place since 1988. And this action marked a defining moment in the onslaught against fundamental rights which the working class had to endure since 1990, when the country was declared independent. The working class had won union rights over 2 decades of intense and bloody struggle against the colonial states. But since 1990, the union movement was gradually eroded through emasculation. The working class had won union rights over 2 decades of intense, the Rossing Uranium Limited was the foundation and remained the bedrock of the union movement in general. The mine workers in particular, and now the workers, are terrified in losing their jobs following the illegal conduct of the company. There are now mines without unions, mines which prohibit unions, and mines which practice the hire and fire principle of contract labor that was abolished along with the apartheid laws. Fittingly, Rossing generated a union leadership in the form of the 9 branch executive who would not budge an inch to compromise employment rights, union rights, and health and safety of the workers. For this reason, they were fired and ejected from the mine together with the historic Union of Namibian Mine Workers. The fight between Chinese imperialists and the Namibian working class is now set to continue on the platform of the Namibian Labour Tribunal, but it will continue within the context of the restive working class movement without consolidated leadership. Mine workers, fishermen, retail workers, industrial workers, dock workers, and general workers are in conflict with capitalists. Their government, atrocious employment condition, and in particular against the universal introduction of contract labor, whose features are equivalent to the basic characteristics of slavery. It is within the context that the branch executive have conceived of the following program to optimize the results of struggle using the Labour Tribunal as propaganda platform, and we intend to rally mine workers at each mine around the country around the issues of the destruction of union movement implicit in the Rossing conflict, and we also intend to rally the rest of the organized working class on the same basis in a united front. Our intent is to use the now existing technology to involve the international working class organization directly in the mobilization of the national working class around the Rossing conflict that will entail amongst others, international consultation and interaction with workers in localities around the country. Namibia and international pressure needs to be brought to bear on a corrupt judiciary to safeguard lawful procedure, confront corruption, and curtail corrupt intentions should it be necessary. This will essentially be done by way of petitions, drawing from the reports of already existing united fronts against dysfunctionality of the Namibian judiciary. The Namibian state is a commander state. Its judiciary works in the interest of imperialists by making sure that it keeps the workers divided and focused on matters, and it has shown that it will go to the extreme in keeping to that. On the basis of the foregoing program, we appeal to the international working movement to support our program by contributing to our fighting fund for the organization of the Namibian working class in the rebuilding of union movements through the rebuilding of the individual unions. Our work entails the building of an independent working class leadership and reclaiming the history of the struggle of the working class in Namibia internationally and learning the lessons therefrom. Fighting fund for 3 months, travel, organizational cost, meeting, subsistence, material, etc. Additional costs, publication, newsletters, public rallies, and press conferences. We have a budget of 3 months where we travel throughout the country from Arandes, which is where in our area in the Rongo region, throughout to the northern region, which is Rundu, and the southern region, which is the Oranjemund, and all those mines are named here. We have the Rossing Usap mine, the salt refinery, Bestje, Malmo Werke, Navachap, Jumbo Coal, B2 Gold, Ochihaze Cement, Orongo Cement, Dundee, Tsundi, Ongopolo Hostel, Exaro, Scorpion, Namdeb, EB, and TCL. It's about 2,000. The estimated kilometers that we have to travel is about 22,240, and it is at the estimated cost of 160,000 Namibian dollars. We have also captured that an estimated of at least 990,000 would be needed to make it possible to travel, to go through these places, to travel and see these comrades of us. And we therefore want to set out a skeleton program of action that will center around union busting, as this is the main concern in the mining sector, and the mining companies are using our unlawful dismissal as a case study to push for their agenda by destroying the existing of MUN, Mine Workers Union of Namibia, on each mine. We will also be mobilizing workers all around the mining sectors and encouraging them to remain and to rebuild their unions, and also to fight for their basic rights of pay and benefits and health and safety. Once again, we commit to lead the working class by uniting the workers all around the world, to stand in complete solidarity with each other, and to stand up against any capitalists that are out there to exploit the working class rights or to violate our working class rights. As I said, Steve, this is what I wanted to read to the panel. We want support and solidarity from our panelist members and from anyone that can send their support, because these people are serious. As the chairman mentioned, they have all the time in the world, and they have all the money in the world that they can do whatever they want. So for them, it's just to financially drain us so that we can give up. But we are not going to give up on this fight. We are going to fight until we have the victory. And we are thankful that we have support, that the comrades that we are asking to stand in solidarity with us are showing us that, and they are motivating us not to give up. And that is what we all want. We want workers all around the world to stand up against these things and to show that they can support each other so that we can win over the fight against these capitalists. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Comrade George. And Gabriel Prahl has not yet joined us, so we're going to go to Comrade Carol Lang, who's a member of the Professional Staff Council, Congress rather, of New York AFT, and has been fighting for support for the miners in her union. So welcome, Carol.
Hi. Before I sort of talk about what happened in my union, which was very disappointing, to say the least, I have a question that I'd like to ask for when we have a generalized conversation after this. We've all given our talks. One of the things that arguments that people who are Stalinists, people who support China, their argument is, and I'm hoping that you'll speak to this, is that China has come in to be a partner to the Africans, that they're helping them build roads, they're helping them build infrastructure. They're not there to just exploit and to take out the resources as the West had traditionally done and continues to do, but is there to be a partner. And so people basically term this socialism with Chinese characteristics. So when we have the regular conversation, I'm hoping that George or John or somebody can speak to exactly the role that the Chinese are playing in terms of their relationship with the African workers and with the environment and with natural resources and loans, because ostensibly they're giving loans but not at predatory levels. So I'm interested in this in particular, and I think that this is a necessary discussion to have, because there are so many people on the left in the United States that really believe that China is there to do good in Africa, as opposed to do what the West has traditionally done. Okay, so my view is that China is capitalist, and they have more billionaires in China and in the Communist Party in China than there are billionaires in the United States. So to argue, as people in my union do, that somehow or other, there are less billionaires, but it's okay to have it's mind-boggling, and I almost cannot follow the argument, given the fact that there's no argument there, when in fact, in my opinion, China is predatory and China is imperialist. And people will debate that, but nevertheless, the exploitation of the African working class is pretty clear, especially from the discussion that George just had about how the African workers in Namibia being treated. And I think that that's the case for other parts of Africa and other parts of the world as well, that there's tremendous exploitation. In fact, I think that China is using convict labor also in Africa as a way of replacing African workers, so that you can then lower the wages and raise the profits of the capitalists in China. Just as another example of the internationalization of capitalism, and how, besides the fact that the Chinese repress their own workers, that people are committing suicide, especially in the tech industry. I went to a demonstration a couple of days ago in New York City of miners from Alabama, who came up to demonstrate in front of the biggest insurance company in the United States and internationally, called BlackRock, which is the investment company that gives money to the employer of the Alabama workers. And there's, so they're here to demand, better wages, better conditions. They're suffering in similar ways. They're working, weeks on end without any days off. If they take a day off, they're fired. And that's their company, but they're getting money from this investment company, which is getting money from China. So the idea that you can, like that, capitalism isn't international, that China has not made a fortune off of not only the Namibian miners, but off of the American miners, which is a reason enough. And I know that George sent a letter of solidarity to the Alabama miners. I mean, there are about 1,100 people that are on strike over there and haven't, they got pittance for, being on strike. Their union leadership is not nearly as good as, George and the rest of you guys. When I asked some of the miners, what is the union leadership doing? And they said, nah, not much. And so, in fact, one of the people that they had speaking was a preacher, like a minister, and we're all going to be in it together. God is here for us. Anyway, it wasn't very motivating, I have to tell you. Anyway, so let me just get back to the reason why I'm speaking is because I had raised a resolution in the Professional Staff Congress, which is the teachers union of the City University of New York. These are all left-wing people, all anti-imperialist, all for good things. And I raised the resolution to support, the miners, the Namibian miners, and the grief that they gave me over this. I mean, there are people who still don't talk to me, actually, on the committee. That the fact that they can choose to vote this resolution down to support the bosses who make billions of dollars, who exploit and fire workers who are trying to defend themselves, to raise their wages, to support their families, really says something about the state of the left, not only in the United States, but I think internationally. And the fact is that these people believe in some way, shape, or form that China is in some way socialist, maybe, with Chinese characteristics, whatever that means, but socialist nevertheless. So to speak poorly, to raise a resolution that will support the miners in Namibia in opposition to the Chinese bureaucracy and thus the Chinese bourgeoisie, it failed miserably. And whatever resolutions that are generally raised within the PSC, they pass overwhelmingly. It may be not unanimously, but overwhelmingly. So it's to the shame of these people who somehow or other consider themselves socialist in some way, that voted down even this is George came to speak to these people. And nevertheless, they're so intransigent about their support of China, and that China isn't the enemy of the United States, and therefore we have to support them at all costs, is really frightening, because ultimately, if and when there is war, which the United States is looking forward to, I mean, we passed a resolution saying no Cold War with China, which I support. On the other hand, they support anything that the Chinese bureaucracy and the billionaires choose to do. So, so anyway, so it was incredibly disheartening. And unless the whole Stalinist viewpoint of the world is shaken, and that people cease to listen. I mean, I could just tell you stories about them, but nevertheless, the fact is that I mentioned that China supports the military in Myanmar and that we should call for the end of selling arms to the Myanmar regime. It's like, it's unbelievable how anti-theoretical these teachers think that they are. And so that's why I posed the question in the first place as to what is the real relationship between the Chinese bosses, the Chinese government, the capitalists. What are they doing? Are they being benevolent to the African workers? Are they just giving loans so that they can then participate in this grand, Belt and Road scheme? For me, I need enough more information about what are the facts on the ground, so that I have no expectation that my comrades on the International Committee, that's what it's called, the International Committee, will ever change their minds. But for workers, American workers who are listening to the debates, I want to be able to explain to them, in fact, what's happening and what's happening really on the ground. So that's my report.
Okay, thank you, Carol. So our next speaker is Comrade Hewat Beukes, and he is the lawyer not only for the miners, but the fishermen and many other unions and trade unions who've been victimized and attacked, and is also a leader of Revolutionary Workers' Party, Workers' Revolutionary Party in Namibia. Welcome, Hewat. You have to unmute yourself, Hewat. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Perhaps I should maybe mention this conception of capitalism. There was a time when capitalism was progressive, brutal but progressive. Progressive in the sense that it released the working class from the landed bondage under feudalism. And wherever it went at that time, it disrupted and broke up the feudal relations that existed. But since about 1900, with the advent of imperialism, with the export of capital, it started to link itself to the most retrogressive sections of society. In fact, to the pre-capitalist manifestations of exploitative classes, the tribal hierarchies in Southern Africa, for instance. And there nothing progressive remained. It linked itself to these extremely backward and primitive social formations to act as compradors for, in other words, agents, puppets of imperialism for the exploitation of the working class. So instead of freeing human society or freeing them from certain social economic bondages, it reenacted the bondages to those primeval social formations. In South Africa, you get the ANC. In Namibia, you get SWAPO. These are not your petty bourgeois as we know them. They are tribal hierarchies to which the imperialists link themselves. The American and European imperialists link themselves to these monstrosities, and likewise the Chinese. Now, that said and done, what is better in the Chinese imperialism than in the Western imperialism? the Chinese imperialism come as a sort of mopping up operation. In Namibia, it has, since China came here, it has begun firstly to destroy the building industry. Artisans and so on, whole communities depending on the building trade were thrown by the wayside, and the tenders were given to Chinese who brought in the central command structures were Chinese from China, and they brought in extremely cheap and brutalized labor from China. That is the nature of the Chinese imperialism. As for myself, I still have to come to terms with China's development as an imperialist, as a proper imperialist power, not because it is not properly imperialist, but as how far it has developed as an imperialist power, because it still uses very outmoded methods of bribery and so on, with the yellow packet under the table and etc. Very crude methods of bribery. It's just the way that they operate that's a bit strange. But nevertheless, the actual relation that they brought in is that they give loans to an exceptionally depraved strata in society. The stratas which do not have ordinary morality as it developed through the ages. For instance, accusations of thievery are accolades to these fellows. And they do these things openly. And the derogation of infrastructure and so on takes place before our very eyes. In a place like Windhoek, which was an exceptionally beautiful city and so on, you see the roads and so on going to waste. Nevertheless, they build new roads. The Chinese are building new roads around Windhoek. We have highways, we have autobahns and so on. But there is no justification for that, really, at this stage. I do not know what all this is all about, but nevertheless, it increases the indebtedness to China. That does not mean that the World Bank and the IMF are standing still, because we are sort of, we owe everybody everything. And you have this comprador state, you have a legal system which the comprador state can't uphold. This legal system that we have is a fairly advanced legal system. The reason for that is because of the gains that the working class fought for and which have been manifested in the legal system. But both the comprador state and the imperialists are gradually busy breaking down that system, taking away legal conceptions very surreptitiously and removing them from the legal system. It's not easy for them to do this because it's painstaking work, but this is done by corporate lawyers and so on. And in many cases, it goes on without notice because of the union bureaucracies that have developed and which are not defending the working class. This is the situation. There's nothing progressive about Chinese imperialism here. It's, as I say, it's a mopping up operation. It has faced the working class, a very militant working class who has built up its militancy over decades, fighting for its rights. And the Chinese imperialists have decided they are going to look this working class in the eye and destroy them, which the Western imperialists have not done. They do it by other means. They are more subtle, but the Chinese have come to destroy. So it is showdown time, it's high noon, and on the one side you have the working class, on the other side you have the Chinese imperialists. It's quite clear that Western imperialist is in agreement with that destruction. So to be brief, I know I'm not a brief speaker, but these are concepts that have developed over over a long time, and it's difficult to cover all the nooks and crannies. But the thing is that they have come to give the coup de grace to any hopes that we may have of establishing workers' rights in this country. Their problem is the worker militancy, as expressed in the stoneworker strikes. And this is necessary at the moment. That is the militant focus of the working classes at these stoneworkers, this cheer, what do you call them, cheer workers. And that has to be harnessed in this struggle. Now, to answer your question, is that the whole sections of our society have been left unemployed, and their skills are being eroded because they do not get employment, massive unemployment because of the tenders that the Chinese are running. And as I've said, they don't even buy cement here. They bring everything in from China with their ships and so on, and they build these things. But there is no industrial infrastructure, no secondary industrial development. Even the extractive sector, which is mining and fishing, are alienated from the Namibian economy. That is the reactionary nature of Chinese imperialism in this country. As far as the China itself is concerned, I do not see how any socialist can consider it having any progressiveness in it, despite the fact that hundreds of millions of workers have marginally improved living standards after the Chinese Communist Party sold the working class slaves to Western imperialism with the transfer of industries from west to east. Besides that I don't think, personally, I don't think it's an indicator of the progressiveness of Chinese imperialism. The measure is, have they improved the relation? Have they qualitatively improved the relation between capital and the worker? And I say a resounding no, because we experience situations here where we have met people where they even abort 7-month-old babies on the policy of what is it, the two baby policies. The brutality that they mete out to the Chinese workers is an expression of the relation between the development of capitalism in China and the working class. I don't see any qualitative change in the relations that has taken place. Now, just shortly to come back to the legal situation. The comprador state is in the service of imperialism. That's why when workers go to court, they are met with a horde of corrupt arbitrators and corrupt judges. And they are handpicked, they are depraved, they are scoundrels, they are criminals. They should have been behind bars. The only way that you can use this, that you can fight, is if the working class is being organized and you fight parallel to it. Unfortunately, you cannot avoid fighting in the courts too. But fighting in a bourgeois court in this country by itself is a futile exercise. It can only, this struggle of the Rossing branch executive, and I'd like to stress, it's not an executive, a past executive. Legally, it is a fully fledged branch executive, and I prefer that we keep it that way. The only way in which we are going to win this struggle is if we organize the entire working class, which are now active and which are organized in Namibia around these issues, around defense of the union movement and against the victimization of the branch executive at Rossing, and if we fight for the sovereignty of the mine workers union. That must be the war cry. And we will have to confront the judiciary with their corruption. At the moment, we are busy with a review on an arbitrator who has already thrown out cases of unfair labor practices on spurious grounds and on illegal grounds. And that is the first point that we are going to, Monday when we step in, we are going to launch this review where we are going to expose this corruption, legal corruption entirely. But it is necessary that the branch executive organized throughout Namibia to mobilize the full might of the Namibian working class. And I am very confident that especially the mine workers, their militancy is still there. It's just a question of rekindling that with these issues.
Okay, thank you, Hewat, for that contribution. And we have some questions on the chat, but we'll be taking them up following the presentations. So our next presenter is Gabriel Prahl. Gabriel is a past president of ILW 52 in Seattle, and he's president of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and his chapter actually held a panel with the miners about your struggle. So welcome, Gabriel.
Hello, Steve.
Hello.
I wasn't prepared to do our presentation today, but kind of caught me off guard, brother, as I was busy here doing some stuff here. But I can say a few words, if that's okay with you.
Definitely.
It's quite a pleasure to be here today, meeting with everyone here, and You know, when I think about the struggle the brothers in Namibia is having, you know, I think about the struggle that we are fighting today around the world. This is blatant attack on working people, blatant attack in organized labor, and I think that's important that labor comes together to fight this struggle. I mean, we can keep beating the drum all day long, but until labor step up and do what labor ain't supposed to be doing. Because I say, as a labor movement, and being part of the labor movement, we have a great responsibility. We have a responsibility to making sure that workers all around the world, not just in our union, not just in our city, not just in our country, but all around the world, come together to fight this blatant attack that's being against working class people. You know, when, you know, today in America, we are facing the struggle of the Republicans attacking and trying to attack the vote rights of people all around. And, you know, even though in those Republican states that they are implementing those voter suppression activity, you know, some people in Democratic state thinks, well, it's not their worry right now because it's not in their state. But the reality is that is attack on all working class people, because you know what, that set the pace for who's going to be the next president, who's going to control the Senate, who's going to control the House. And if we don't pay attention to that this is an attack on all of us, especially working class people, we're going to end up with our administration we just left. On a Donald Trump agenda, which will set the stage for the American government to support countries that are oppressing working class people all around the world. And this is something that needs to be changed. And I don't know how we're going to do this, but I know if labor come together, we have a fighting chance. And, you know, when we look back at the history of the labor movement and the accomplishment that we have done, it's like we already got the blueprint. We already know what we've done. It's just about who is leading the labor movement and what their agenda is. Are they going to take a bold agenda and come together and unify workers? That's what's needed. We have to reach to a stage where we can exercise the power of what the labor movement has to make change. And that's the power to hold production at the point, stop the movement of cargo at the point of production. This is the word I want to use. Because when we do that, we changes. You know, we can make fuss, we can try to move legislation, because as we've seen, there have been many progressive legislation passed, and then it just take one person like Donald Trump to come in and change all of that, kill it. Put a lot of people on the Supreme Court that will overturn everything that's been fought for the past 50 years. So, you know, it's a critical moment, critical time that people need to put aside their differences and come together. We need to link that connection with working class people all around the world. And we need to come to the aid of our working class people, no matter which part of the world, that are being oppressed, that are being targeted. I mean, there's no reason why we're sitting here talking about people in a country that is full of resources, full of minerals, and all kind of stuff that should not having the people in that country be suffering or living in poverty. That's ridiculous. That's unacceptable. I mean, but we know about the struggle of South Africa. We know about the struggle that going on with the Palestine people. We know the struggle that going on with the people in the Philippines. And I mean, now we can go Venezuela, Cuba, all these places. And these are places that are full of resources, but because they refuse to be controlled by the elite power that just cater to the rich, they have to suffer the consequence. While labor is standing aside and just not doing what they are supposed to be doing, what they got the capability of doing. And that's coming together, shutting it down, and make a demand, list of demand. Just like the Million Worker March in 2004 when they marched to Washington, D.C. to carry out list of demands, and this included them for all. We need to bring that reality to life. We need some give people hope. It's too long. We've been suffering too long with all this disaster, pressure, the pandemic, all this. Then we got to people got to go hungry. People can't get access to vaccine. This is the 21st century. Why are we still dealing with, why is it people in the world still have to deal with hunger, hungriness, homelessness? I mean, come on. It is ridiculous. But I know that things are not going to change till we come together. We have to come together, and we got to show the power that we have as our people, as our world, and as workers. It's about time something happened that's going to make the change. There's no reason why the next generation has to come into this. There's no reason why our grandkids have to pay the cost for rich people living in luxury. There's no reason for that. And the fact that another nation, another country comes in another country and oppress those people in that other country should not be tolerated. I don't have the answer, brothers. They say we can fix this today, but I know that if the labor movement come together, we have a fighting chance. Now we need to have people in power in the labor movement that can go back to the basic. And when I say the basic, because there was one time when the labor movement was one of the most powerful things around. We had the power to change things. And we still do. We just got to let go of all that bureaucracy and do what we are organized to do, to make change for a better living for workers, make change for a better living for humanity, and give this human race a chance to grow and free of oppression and free of terror, because that's what they do. They terrorize the people all around. And those that are benefit from it, the one that perpetrating and pushing it. And we got to call it out like it is. You know, we have a new administration here in the United States that's not doing everything to change what we need to get done. They need to take a bold action and call executive order, just like Donald Trump was doing on changing things for worse. We need to change things for better. And if they're not doing it, we need to call them out like it is. We need to organize around them and make it clear that we're not asking, we're demanding that things be changed. So I want to just tell the brothers to stand strong. Don't give up. The struggle is real. And let's continue fighting. Let's continue fighting to make the change. There's a lot of people around the world that feel the same way you feel, same way I feel. But we need to come together and organize together and bring those people together so we can show our strength. And we have to fight alone on this battle because we are fighting the same fight all over the world, same fight. There's no reason why we should fight alone in the country. We should bring all the people together. My dream is one day the whole world would shut down and everybody would stand still for a minute, show the power of the working class. That's my dream. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Brother Gabriel. And before we go on into our last speaker, I wanted to make mention that Hewat Beukes, Brother Hewat, home was raided. He and his wife Erica and also the other family members were surrounded, and they've shut off their electricity and water. And I think this is needs to be discussed as well. We have a defense campaign going for him because the attack on him is an attack on the workers that he represents throughout Namibia. So maybe we can discuss that in the discussion. The next and last speaker is Anna Majavu, and she's a journalist with New Frame and actually has written the only article in Africa on this struggle and investigated. So welcome to this panel, Anna.
Thank you, Comrade Steve. Hello, everyone, and thanks to Comrade Steve for arranging a wonderful seminar. And thank you so much for all the inspirational speeches. I mean, it's just been great to hear it. And I will keep my input very brief because, you know, journalists are not the most interesting speakers, especially on labor issues. It's always best to hear from the workers themselves. And maybe just to say my views are my own and don't represent my employer in this meeting. So, I mean, I saw the dismissal of the shop stewards as a very important story. Being based in South Africa, this is the neighboring country of Namibia. And I worked in unions in the 1990s that were collectively bargaining for the first time immediately after apartheid ended. So it's a very gripping story, you know, 20 something years later, when you have these collective agreements that have been in place for decades. And you have a really good, a union with a really, really good solid layer of united shop stewards, like the MUN shop stewards at Rossing Mine. And then a new employer comes in and immediately tries to downgrade the collective agreement. And then, you know, what's notable is that they always use the same dirty tricks. So as soon as the union says, no, we don't want to give up our pay scales or our health and safety, they'll either bribe the union leader or they'll find one shop steward that's more amenable than others and try and divide people that way. And often in South Africa, they end up trying to smash unions by using the same tactics, which are accusing their shop stewards of bringing the company into disrepute and firing them on that basis. And then, as you've all pointed out, that sets in motion a very, very long, drawn-out chain of events where you have dismissed workers and, you know, no income at all, suddenly overnight, facing losing their houses, can't pay their mortgages, and the company just appeals at every level. So the cases go on for 3 years, as Comrade George has said. I think the case might go on for 3 years. But what's very noteworthy about this story is that it isn't just a group of foreign capitalists who came in and bought the mine and want to smash the union, which would be, you know, expected, but it's a state-owned enterprise. So China National Nuclear Corporation bought the 68.62% stake, and a South African state-owned enterprise, the IDC, actually owns 10% of the mine. So they, you know, we should try and hold them accountable in some way for upholding the labor laws. And I think an important aspect of the case is the Namibian government's collusion with the CNNC RUL in circumventing the labor laws. Because in South Africa and Namibia, the labor laws are the products of decades of very, very difficult struggle by unions. So they weren't put there by our governments voluntarily. And from time to time, our governments will try and amend the labor laws, in other words, downgrade them. So when big investors come in from anywhere, like CNNC has done, and then they really just use dirty tricks to try and smash the union, the governments will definitely just turn a blind eye to that, because it's what they've wanted to do themselves and they haven't been able to do. And that's what we've seen in this case. I found a quote from the Mine and Energy Minister back in 2019 where he said there's no objection on the part of the Namibian government to the sale because the buyer will probably have to abide by the labor laws. But then obviously when the CNNC didn't abide by it, the government just takes no action. And another important aspect of this story and the CNNC's takeover of this mine, for me, is their insistence on doing away with the safety officers at the mine. And that's something that the shop stewards correctly said no to. So, I mean, that has a whole context in Southern Africa, where, from hundreds of years ago, colonizers came from Europe and literally plundered vast tracts of lands for minerals. And during apartheid in South Africa, and I know it was the same in Namibia, working class black men in particular were forced into working in terribly unsafe mines for very, very little pay because there were just very few other jobs open to them. And thousands of mine workers lost their lives in mine accidents. And there still are mine accidents today, but most of the modern safety standards we have in South African and Namibian mines now weren't put in place willingly by the mine owners, but they came as a result of a very, very hard struggle, including long and bitter strikes by the mining unions. So if a company like CNNC can simply come along and say to the union, well, we're doing away with safety officers, I mean, we will literally have mine workers once again dying on the job in easily preventable accidents, and it won't just be one or two. It will be, probably thousands again over the years. So maybe just to touch on the media, what we find in South Africa, at least, because there are a number of Chinese state-owned entities and private capitalists from China who have bought big stakes in mines here too. They don't. The issue doesn't get much coverage. It's mainly the business press or the specialist engineering press that covers this. So we don't actually have a big picture of the working conditions on the mines because the engineering and business press are not interested in the views of the workers at all. In fact, they barely ever mention workers unless there's a strike or a major accident which causes a halt to production and a loss of profits. And another thing is that you probably know there's very few actual labor journalists or journalists who've been around for a long time left in South Africa. It might be the same in Namibia. That's because the mainstream media has gone through different rounds of downsizing and restructuring and convergence over the past 12 years. So, and that's obviously just to so they can set themselves up as a lean, mean operation that follows a 24-hour news cycle. So you won't get a lot of support from the media in a case like this because, there just aren't the people around who are willing to do those stories. And then the other problem, I think Carol alluded to, there's a general problem in the media when it comes to reporting on China in Africa specifically. Because there's one stream of thought, which, as Carol said, argues that any negative reporting on China is Trumpist. It can fuel xenophobia and anti-Chinese sentiment, and therefore we just shouldn't report anything negative about projects that have been introduced by China at all. But I mean, obviously, that just leads to denialism, and you find people just ignoring, abuses of workers, as has happened in this case. I mean, of course, the other side of the coin is the very reactionary right-wing kind of reporting that you find in places like Australia, which just criticizes everything about China, and it creates so much hostility about China that you'll find local Chinese people who've been living in Australia for 3 or 4 generations, getting attacked in the street because of the climate that's been created. So obviously, I mean, the correct way for me to report on any investment by the Chinese state and Chinese private capitalists where workers' rights are abused is just to go straight to the affected workers and report from their perspective, and from the perspective that believes that workers have the right to decent pay and working conditions. but you know, you aren't going to get much of this reporting. And so, I mean, I think the comrades are pretty isolated as far as the media goes. They're going to get very few stories, and even journalists like me. I mean, I have pitched the story to other outlets, and they haven't been that interested. I mean, they haven't wanted to publish it, so it's pretty hard. So, I mean, what I can really say is that you know, having an international group like the one that's been set up, the International Labour Solidarity Committee for the Namibian miners, which can bring all the activists and journalists and union locals and people from all over the world together. And then, you know, particularly with Comrade Steve and all the work he's been doing, I mean, that amazing video you made, I think that's probably the most useful and important thing we can all do together right now. And, you know, this committee could become really very important going forward, because there'll be more and more cases like this where we actually do need that global solidarity, and we can't rely on the global, you know, you can't even rely on your union head office. I mean, the union, from my perspective, the union in Namibia should be really supporting the comrades that have been dismissed. And then we should have the international union federations also supporting in a much more meaningful way, but they just aren't. So this kind of committee is very helpful and useful. And the last thing I wanted to say was I would urge us all to come up with a way to set up a fund for these affected shop stewards. Because if we're all fundraising in our different countries, I mean, we will be able to collect the kind of funds that they need. You know, they're a group that has a huge amount of political and organizing expertise, and they're in a country which sounds like it's gonna have a lot of its industry and a lot of its workplaces being bought by overseas investors, especially from China. And so the MUN shop stewards, if we could have that fund to provide them with some kind of financial support, I mean, then they could actually carry on organizing, and that would be one way to increase the chances of winning the struggle, as Comrade George has said, that they really do need to do. I mean, otherwise, you know, they're just going to be broken into little pieces, and it will become very difficult. Thanks. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Anna, for that contribution. And I want to also report that we've made some effort to get the South African trade unions, COSATU, NUMSA, SAFTU, South African Federation of Trade Unions, to support this. And the union has made appeals to those unions, and there's been complete silence, which is a very bad sign that the South African unions refuse to issue statements of solidarity with their brothers and sisters in Namibia. Their struggle is bound together, actually, and need for unity of all Southern workers, Southern African workers, is critical. Okay, well, why don't we open it up? If people could put their hands up that they would like to speak, we'll get a list of speakers, and thanks for the contributions. So
just an interjection, please.
Yes,
I don't think Anna's contribution was a drab journalistic report. I think it was mesmerizing.
Yeah, it was an excellent report, and as I said, the only journalist report in South Africa on this struggle in Namibia of the workers. So, and this is an important issue for all the unions in Namibia and South Africa. So, okay, any comments, discussion? Okay, Charles, you're on.
Okay,
and then Carol.
Didn't expect to be first, but thank you, comrades. I'm Charles Frackless in California, Oakland here, and been involved in left, and I speak on behalf of the International Leninist Trotskyist Tendency. We've uploaded a statement of defense for the comrades in Namibia, and that can be found on the website of the Solidarity Committee. I won't read through it all, but I want to talk a little bit about how we understand what's been going on and the difficulties we face in the American working class, and in particular on the left, not just the American working class.
Charles, before you go on, let's try to limit the comments to 3 minutes each person, so everybody can get in.
Okay, I will try to limit to 3 minutes. And just in particular, we identified the rise of Chinese imperialism going back to 2009, and the implications of that for the semi-colonies internationally are very important for the workers' orientation to understand that the fight against imperialism is not just against the US EU bloc, but against the rising Russia-Chinese imperialist bloc, and that the workers in the semi-colonies, if they are listening to those who say your only enemy is the United States and the EU, they will be disarmed when the Chinese imperialists come in and make deals with the comprador bourgeoisie to do exactly what the comrades have been explaining. So it's very important what you've been explaining and showing us is the reality on the ground. And this is not just in Namibia, it is being played out across Africa as well as Latin America. And so what we see as a inter-imperialist struggle, as the declining power of US imperialism is being confronted by the emerging and ever strengthening power of Chinese imperialism. Now, the problems also are involved in the reactionary side of the leadership of the working class in the United States, which has long been anti-Chinese and chauvinist American, with their big anti-Chinese campaigns, Build Here in America campaigns, and that makes it very difficult to explain Chinese imperialism without sounding as if we are the new Trumpists or Bidenists. And there is a strong layer in the American left, and we can mention them as the ICL and the IG and the IBT and the PSL. If you don't know these acronyms, they are Trotskyist and neo-Stalinist and Stalinist organizations in the United States that have not recognized the restoration of capitalism in China and take the side of unconditional defense of China, which means they're basically they're telling the workers internationally, you have nothing to fear from Chinese imperialism. Some of them are a little more critical in identifying the role of the bureaucracy, and they had a little bit of an issue in Greece when the Piraeus port was taken over by the Chinese, and the workers there in the Stalinist Union actually had to go on strike against them. And that exposes the contradiction. So we need to make these points and make them clearly so that we can prepare the workers internationally for the pending inter-imperialist conflict, which unfortunately leads towards inter-imperialist war. So the struggle against inter-imperialist war is the struggle to understand the actual class nature of China and how imperialism is developing. And I'll thank you there.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So Carol?
Okay, I'm going to make this really short because I know a lot of people, this is a wonderful panel, and I'm sure it's generated a lot of interest and thoughts about what to do about, how to help the miners, but also what's happening inside all of our working classes and the bureaucracy that chooses not to fight. I wanted to remind Hewat that he really needs to speak about what's happening to him so that we can sort of collectively think about what we can do to help him against SWAPO, who's turning off his electricity and turning off his water and making life incredibly hard for him so that he doesn't defend the workers, because he knows that his job as a communist is to defend the rights of workers. I just want to make a plug also. Some of us belong to a group called the United Front Committee for Labor Party, because by and large, the Democratic Party is a party of the bosses. And so we want to organize a party that will defend the interest of the workers, which means that we have to be not only in opposition to the Democratic Party, but our own trade union leaders who are, you know, leading us down the path to utter destruction. And, you know, on one side, we have the Stalinists in my union, but on the other side, you have pro-imperialists who are the Trumpka people. And so our goal is to try to organize a labor party that will break from the Democratic Party and start to promote the idea of working class solidarity, striking, but not only in the United States, but defense of workers around the world, so that we see ourselves as part of an international struggle. But without breaking from the Democratic Party, then we're going to be once again insular and only think in terms of how could we push these people to the left. That's what the DSA is doing in the United States. So we want to break with that. So anybody who's on this call that may be from the United States, please look into, and everybody else, look into our website, the United Front Committee for a Labor Party, and let's get into this conversation about how we can go ahead and defend workers, but ultimately with the idea of developing an independent party that's going to fight against both the Democrats and the Republican Party.
Thank you, Carol. And Hewat, do you want to talk briefly about your attack by the police and what happened surrounding your house and your cutting off of electricity and water? Can you give us an update?
Hewat?
Maybe his power went out.
I say Erica is my wife.
Oh, Erica.
We've been together for a very long time. Actually, we grew up together, and we started our political relationship in '74 when we organized the socialist youth clandestinely, because at that time the communist legislation was here. And we were very much part of the struggle for independence. We invariably became in conflict. We came into conflict with the nationalist leadership of the SWAPO, because we joined SWAPO in 1976. Actually, we were part of the SWAPO Youth League, who was a sort of independent youth movement, but connected to SWAPO for reasons that we will later can explain later. So we were, our whole adult life was spent on the liberation struggle and the clandestine building of a socialist movement. Come independence, we were also deeply involved in the union struggles from the early 70s. And during the 80s, we were involved in union struggles. In 1984, Erica founded the Committee of Parents, which fought against the mass killings and jailings of SWAPO members in exile by the leadership of SWAPO leadership and the so-called frontline states. And in 1990, the country gained independence. And then we were fighting for to try and stem the degeneration of the working class movement by an opportunist leadership. And she formed the Workers' Advice Center. And through the Workers' Advice Center, we tried to work with shop stewards, with working class leaders, because there was wholesale betrayal by the union leaders, abandonment of the unions, and there was privatization, massive privatization, etc. All these attacks took place during the 90s. As a result, we were in frontal conflict with the new regime. And this regime was supported by the imperialists. So it was literally a running battle over the past 31 years of independence. Yeah, okay, I told them about the killings and so on. So this is the reason why they started to attack us. They attacked like the old colonial power, they attacked our livelihood. We didn't get jobs and so on. At times it was extremely difficult and so on. Then they started to fight us personally. One of the methods that they used was to attack, as I've said, our livelihood. At one point, they cut the prepaid electricity. No, first they cut the water. And then a number of court cases, they actually made finding judgments that that outlawed us from access to any running water or electricity. And for this reason, comrades in England yeah, no, that's those are details that can come later. The comrades from England, our comrades from the Workers' International literally sustained us on these questions because we did not have electricity and they barred us from running water, and which was illegal, strictly illegal from a legal point of view. And we re-established the water ourselves. We took law in our own hands and established the water ourselves. So, because we couldn't otherwise. But we blocked them from entering the premises. And then they took us to court with the First National Bank and they sold our house illegally. Everything they done against us, they did illegally. And so we are still fighting around the house, and the comrades from England are supporting us to I'm going to defend the court case myself because these lawyers are, they don't have a political consciousness to be able to do that. But I'm being assisted by comrades who are legal experts. So we are going to fight it that way. The case of the house is now in the Supreme Court under appeal. But in the meantime, they decided to cut our water. So, as I've said before, it's the first time that I started to realize that solidarity comes in a drum of water, because many people brought drums of water here, and it was nice to see that people cared that much. But my house is full of drums of water now. The situation is.
Solar panels.
Oh yes, the comrades also assisted us with solar panels. So
Our
electricity is now,
nature.
yeah, it's separate from the national grid. The one advantage is that we don't have blackouts. We always have electricity. The situation is, it might seem that okay, in our case, it is a personal fight. But they fight us personally. It's very specific. But it is also reflective of what they are doing to the rest of the working class. Because there's a lot of thievery and fraud going around. They get monies from these imperialists ostensibly to maintain the water supplies, especially during COVID-19. But they cut water to force working class families to find money somewhere to go and pay them. So they get a double income, one from the imperialists and one from the working class for the same service. That is the level of thievery that takes place here. But in our case, it is personally honed as a political attack. At a time by last year, because we know that the American embassy is we won 2 seats in parliament in the 2014 election. We are the Workers' Revolutionary Party to rebuild the 4th International. We won 2 seats, but the American embassy and the EU warned these fellows to keep us out of parliament. And so that we were never able to utilize the parliament. And at the same time, the Speaker of Parliament stole the money that was destined for the Workers' Revolutionary Party. So they owe us quite a bit, but it's money we'll never recoup. So that is the story of the situation. What I need to say is that because the comrades from Britain and other comrades have the working class workers, comrades of Rossing and the fishermen and so on, have sent objections, protests to the Supreme Court, to the High Court, and to the President, and to the Mayor of Windhoek on this victimization, which meant an enormous amount for us. I mean, besides the morale booster and the humanity of it all, but this was quite a necessary gesture from comrades to do, because once these people have failed to subdue us through those means, they obviously, I mean, the American imperialists, all imperialists are killers, and we were beginning to be concerned for especially my life. But as I say, we live by the maxim that we are not living on the dictates of somebody else. We live on what we consider as necessary to do. So if you decide to kill us, that's your decision. You can do that. We will do what we have to do. We cannot let bloody murderers and rapscallions dictate how we are going to conduct our lives. We are against this total destruction of the whole economy of the countries. Everywhere it's the same. It takes different forms depending on the situation of the country. This is a semi-colony, so to speak. It's used purely for extractive purposes. In places like Zimbabwe and so on, they destroy the skills that could have led to industrialization. They are destroying industrialization in South Africa, and so on. So even though the forms of destruction may differ from country to country, but the destruction is there for all to see. And it's for us to intervene. And if we cannot intervene successfully, then obviously it's the end of humanity. So we've got only one task, and that is to seriously intervene in this destruction. And that's what we are going to do. And we have put our hope in the working class. We are very satisfied of the developments in a place like Namibia. And we are also very glad that we have been able to rally international support for this. And it seems that we are putting the ship to sea. So that is for us extremely important. The support, we need support, but it's only for in the case of the services that they have taken from us, cut from us. We need to take them to court for what they call a mandamus, because our laws prohibit this kind of actions. We need that, but we also need petitions from the comrades internationally to let them know that we are not alone. It is necessary for our safety, our physical safety. I wouldn't like these bastards to put me to sleep in the dark. If they do it in the light, that's okay, but not in the dark. But the question now is not, the concentration should not be on supporting us as a family. It should be on supporting these fellows at Rossing to do their job. And that is to rally firstly, the entire mining workers community, and to gather simultaneously the other sections of the working class together.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hewat. And David, you had your hand up earlier. You want to, and then Gabriel is next after David. David Himson. David, are you there? Maybe he had to do something. Okay, well then let's go to Gabriel. Gabriel?
Yes, Steve. You know, as I was listening, everybody speaking, I pay attention to Sister Carol on the talk about the two bourgeois party that we deal with and why we need a Labour Party. And she's right, we do need a Labour Party. And I'm for having a Labour Party. The question is, how are we gonna get that done? What's our plan to get that done? And the reason I'm saying that because you know, growing up, you know, I used to always hear money is the root of all evil, right? And I get to understand that as I grow up and see people are supposed to be leading our labor movement, that we believe that they're gonna stand up for our labor, but then they the reality comes out that they are corrupt and all they thinking about is wealth and getting paid. And they take the money from corporation or as we will say, they just want to be a leader in the labor movement just to get paid instead of to serve the workers and serve the people. You know, I'm a leader in the A. Philip Randolph Institute Seattle chapter. I'm the president. And when I think back on A. Philip Randolph, when he died poor. He was a civil rights movement leader. He was a labor organizer. And he never thought about wealth. He thought about serving the people and fighting for the movement. And that was one of the reasons that he died poor, because his focus was the people and not himself. That's real about what the labor real revolutionary should be about. I think about Harry Bridges and the fact that when he was fighting to organize the ILW, that he was offered money to leave, abandon the struggle and go back to Australia. And he addressed the membership and let them know what was offered to him. And he asked them what they wanted him to do. He said he would take the money and donate it to the ranking file so they could use it. And he'd go back, but they told him no, they want him to stay. And he did. And that's how the ILW was able to find a leader that move us to what we are today. You know, but I about Zimbabwe, and you know, my grandparents originally from Jamaica, and when I think about Jamaica, I think about Bob Marley, Robert Nesta Marley, the revolutionary prophet. And I remember before Bob Marley died, he did a concert in Zimbabwe. You know, when Bob Marley was the revolutionary fighters in Zimbabwe and wanted to pay Bob Marley to come play there. When they realized they didn't have enough money to pay for a quality singer of his class, Bob Marley decided he was going to pay for it, all the expenses, ship all the stuff to Zimbabwe, and do the concert. And when Bob Marley did his concert in Zimbabwe, you had the revolutionary fight. It was so packed that you had revolutionary fighters outside, they couldn't get in. And what they did is just tore the gates down. Tore the gates down so they can listen to Bob Marley play. And the oppressed leadership back then in Zimbabwe decided to throw tear gas all over the place. And you had people scattering all over. But Marley stayed on that stage. He was in his moment. His band started to walk off the stage, one by one or in pairs. But when they look around and they saw Bob Marley did not move, he stayed on that stage. They all decided to walk back up on that stage and stand with him. You know, there was tear gas flying, everything, but he did not move. And when they all came back up, Bob Marley said, "No, I know who are the real revolutionaries," because that's what it's all about. When we're in a struggle, we got to stand up. We cannot be intimidated, push back. You got to be willing to fight or die for the cause. That's what real revolutionary does. And that's what this is all about. We got to stand up. We got to fight for the cause. We got to make sure that we send a message that we will not be pushed back, we will not be terrorized, and will not be intimidated by no oppression. So I just wanted to share this vision. I wanted to share this story and make us all know that there's hope. And we got to get rid of those that are part of the oppression, who've been getting paid, who are part of labor leadership, and make sure we replace them with people that don't love the money. They love people. They love humanity. And those are the ones that we want leading the labor movement and our Labor Party. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Okay, thank you. And I think we're going to have to wrap it up, but I appreciate that, Gabriel. And I wanted to announce that we're looking to have an International Day of Solidarity with the Namibian miners and Racing on Friday, August the 13th. And we're planning to have a press conference at the Chinese consulate in San Francisco at 12 noon, and also possibly an action at the New York Namibian consulate in New York. And hopefully we can have other actions globally to demand justice for the Namibian miners and the working class of Namibia. Oh, somebody had their hand up. Bronwyn?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Steve, I had it up. Just very briefly, I was going to say before you spoke at the end there was just to say that we need to decide at this meeting, in as much as we're able to take forward this battle that is being waged by the Racing miners, that it's an absolutely key struggle in Namibia, which is at a very crucial point in its politics, and it's got this group of workers who are bringing together a whole array of workers within Namibia itself. They're prepared to take this stand against the Chinese state, and they're prepared to challenge the position of collaboration of their own government and the courts and the whole state within Namibia. So I think it's an extraordinarily courageous battle that they're putting up, and that we should be coming in behind them, and we should be thinking about how we can publicize this struggle, depending on what resources we have, how we can and build solidarity in each of our countries, how we can do our absolute utmost to push it forward and to try and get achieve success for it. So I just wanted to make that point about the discussion that's been taking place during the panel, because I know various other issues have come up, and we've talked about those, and the issue of the state attack on Hewat and his family is extremely important. But I think we, above all, and I'm not suggesting that people are doing this, but above all, we mustn't lose sight of this struggle of these miners, and we need to pull out all the stops and do everything that we can to ensure its success. And thanks, Steve, for talking about that International Day of Action and so on.
Okay, thank you, Bronwyn. Last speaker, George, Comrade George, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Thank you, Steve. One of the other ways that can put pressure on our case and on the fight, on the struggle itself, is to put pressure on all the Chinese embassies that are in the countries, in each country. On this case, we have a letter that we wrote to the Chinese president, and up to now it's not even responded. Even the president of our country did not respond. We are going to write follow-up letters just to put continuous pressure on this government, so that justice can be so that we can find justice in our case. That's just what I wanted to add.
Okay, and we got a couple more minutes. David, you're on, and then John.
Yeah, apologies, comrade, for maybe missing some of that discussion. We had some house removals in progress. First of all, a tribute to Comrade Hewat and partner. I think you're doing a marvelous job. We recognize you as class fighters right now and from the history of the struggle in Namibia. Secondly, apologies deepest and most profound that you comrades who are just across the border from South Africa are struggling alone, and then talking directly to international comrades and getting support, which is marvelous, but actually not even getting a hearing from the South African labor movement, you know, which I helped found in the 1970s. This is disgusting, and I want to apologize on behalf of the labor movement. And then finally, comrades, you may have seen the headlines. South Africa is in absolute political turmoil. The question is, where are we going and how is the working class reconstituting itself? And I just invite you, you'll see it there in the chat, to a discussion tomorrow at South African time, 5 o'clock. And, you know, we'll have leading speakers from the poorest of poor, Abashlali, and from someone of some reputation who's worked from above to get some change, Ronnie Casrals. It's going to be an open-ended discussion as this one has been, and I look forward to comrades participating and having their say. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David. And next speaker, John.
Thank you, Comrade Steve. I think for me, just a few words. First of all, a debtor is a slave to a creditor. I think this must be understood in the context of what our current states, African states, are going through. They've taken so much money that they are not able to pay, and unfortunately, they just have to obey their masters. Secondly, this leadership that were busted, if they don't return to their respective employer or to their employer, there's no employer in Namibia that will be able to employ them because they are basically blacklisted because of their stance on this issue of employee busting. And thirdly, so it's imperative that they return. It's important that they return. Thirdly, it's a lonely fight. It's a lonely fight when you do not have international backing for the reason that you are not supported. First of all, you are not fully supported by your leadership. The national leadership that are supposed to support you, they are not fully supporting. So meaning they are showing both the national and the international community that you are at fault, while you are not at fault. But most of this leadership are politically inclined. They take instruction from their political affiliation, from their political affiliate, and they cannot go against that instruction. So whatever they do, they have to evaluate it in the eyes of their political affiliation. And I believe that's quite clear what then that means. So it's a lonely fight if we do not have international support. If we do not have international support, you know, some people are not only fearing about what is the obvious, but some people are fearing for their lives because it takes a heart, a socialist heart, for you to challenge the status quo that currently has been created in Namibia. So we really need your support by all means for us to continue standing. Thank you, Comrade Steve.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, and thank you for joining us in this important panel on international solidarity between the working class really of the world and the workers, miners of Namibia. And our struggle is your struggle. We have to build international solidarity, and that is what we're going to do and to make your struggle successful. So thank you, brothers and sisters, and forward and onward.